everyone, this is the Undying Nephilim, and today I'm going to show you the hero characters as well as their respective units for the Kokiri and the Goma. Now, both these factions have some of my favorite characters in Zelda, so that's kind of a coincidence. They're also two of my favorite factions, so I guess, I don't know, maybe it's not that coincidental, but they got a few pretty cool heroes, and if just looking at them here, just visually, some of them look pretty cool too. And then I'll also show the two Titans, which I've actually shown them both in multiple videos, but I'll go into a little more detail on the Titans, on what they are, what their abilities will be, and things of that nature. So, guess we will start with the Kokiri first, and we'll start with the Kokiri heroes and the Kokiri units for them. But, first of all, before I begin, I was under the impression that the new version of Zero AD, which is 0.23, I thought they were going to add in active hero abilities in that version, but apparently they're not in that version yet. So a lot of the hero abilities that I'll talk about will not appear in the next version. Some of them will, because they use the current upgrade system in Zero AD. So like Fado here, all of his abilities will work in the next version, but some of them, their abilities won't work until they add the active abilities. And for those that don't know what those are abilities where you click on a hero and then you click on the ability and then it does it, and then after a set amount of time the ability ends or whatever. You don't have to click it again to stop it. So I'm kind of sad that some of the ideas I had won't be in quite yet. Heroes gaining levels isn't going to be in the next version. It's technically possible. Obviously in Zero AD, many of their units can gain levels. I feel it's kind of pointless without the actual hero abilities at the moment. So heroes leveling up won't be in until the active hero abilities are added in. So just a little heads up before we begin that some of the things I'm about to talk about are for the future. They won't necessarily be in the next release. So anyway, the heroes for the Kokiri, we'll start with Saria, who is the Emerald Sage, the Sage of the Forests. She eventually becomes the Queen of the Kokiri. In the current point of the cinematics that I'm in, she's not the queen yet, but I think it's pretty obvious she eventually becomes the leader of the Kokiri, with the Goma tree out of the way, and Maido as a traitor with the Goma. So she is one of my favorite characters in canon. I also like her a lot in my game, obviously. She is an archer. She is an archer hero, so she's got a ranged attack with a bow and arrow. She'll have abilities that help ranged units and archer units in general. So she boosts the ranged potential of the Kokiri, and they're kind of a ranged faction. So she's pretty handy for that. And also, one of her abilities, when you start a match, it'll instantly unlock the Guardian Fairy tech. So all of your units will have Guardian Fairies at the start without having to build the little fairy building and researching it. So that's pretty cool. Oops, didn't mean to click on him. I meant to click on the little guy here. This is, wait for him to finish growling. This is Saria's unique unit, which are the Deku trees. Not the Great Deku Tree, the smaller brothers and sisters and spawn of him. And the Deku trees are they're kind of like the Zora Hierophant Canopy. They're kind of like a giant creature unit that can garrison smaller units in it. So they're pretty powerful. They're not. I don't think I'm going to classify them as a cavalry unit. They're just like a giant creature unit. They do pretty good damage to buildings and things like that. But yeah, their main ability is that they can garrison other units in the canopies. So we'll gather these little slingshotters up in the canopy, and they are safe from damage while they're riding these tree creatures. And also, when they're in the canopy, they can cross over bodies of water, which I'll go ahead and demonstrate right now. Actually, I don't think this body of water is deep enough. My bad. Let me see, is there a deep river? No, there's not. Well, that was a little mistake on my part. I'll have to show it another time, but these guys can cross basically water up to the canopy, and they can ferry units across rivers, so they're kind of like pseudo-transport ships in a way, which I think is pretty cool. It's the same thing with the Zora's hydrophilic canopies, except the Zora can already cross the water with their normal units, so it's not really as special for them. But yeah, that's Saria's unique unit, the little Deku Trees. I guess they're not that little compared to the rest of the Kokiri, but they're small compared to their Titan. Anyway, the next hero for the Kokiri is Fado, who first appeared, and I think his only appearance was in the Wind Waker. He is the Sage of the Forest that eventually replaces Saria. Actually, I make a correction. He actually isn't the Sage of the Forest. He becomes the Sage of the Winds. Is it the Winds or Earth? I believe it's the Winds. In the canon of my game, he's also the Sage of the Winds, but he's still... I don't want to spoil too much, but he's still kind of also the Sage of the Forest. There's something that kind of happens with the Sages later on, which is why their titles are a little bit different after the current generation. But he is the Sage of the Winds, and also Saria's replacement after she abandons the title. Well, she doesn't really abandon it, but the Sages have to choose successors, and he's the Sage that she chooses to replace her. But anyway... Another thing that I thought would be in the next version of Zero AD but isn't in yet is ambient sound effects. So this won't be in the game until a later version, but I'll have it so that if you can kind of tell that he's playing a little violin here, I'll have it so that whatever song he's currently playing is the sound effects that he makes when he's standing around and moving around. His ability will actually be to play different melodies from the Zelda series, and he's actually a non-combat hero. He can't directly attack enemy units. His ability, you click on one of the different songs that he can play, and depending on the song you choose, he has different abilities. So like for the Song of Storms, which is one that he can play, and I'll go ahead and click on it now. If you look around the screen now, it's starting to rain. So as long as he's playing the Song of Storms, it'll be raining, and it'll lower the line of sight of every enemy unit on the map, and also I think it'll probably also hamper like the accuracy of their ranged units. So if he's playing the Song of Storms, all of their archers won't be quite as accurate. I'm not decided on that. It might be a little bit overpowered, but he'll have 5 different tracks that he can play. He'll play the Minuet of Forest, Saria song, the Earth God's lyric, and the Wind God's aria. So each of them will give him different abilities. Like the Minuet of Forest will summon a bunch of different forest creatures to fight in your army, which will be pretty darn cool. The Earth God's lyric will boost all of the siege damage of units within his aura. So as long as he's playing that, everyone will do more damage to buildings, which is helpful to the Kokiri, because they're actually not a very good siege faction. Their siege weapons are pretty weak compared to most of the other factions. So he's kind of a siege booster in that regard too. So he's a pretty handy hero. He's a non-combat hero, but he can definitely provide a lot of help to your armies, and his abilities are really supportive rather than offensive or defensive, which I think is pretty cool. I like heroes that aren't necessarily just tanks or healers or whatever. But anyway, his unit is this little guy here who also plays a violin. They're kind of like miniature versions of Fado. You can't choose what song they play, though. They're just going to play, I'm thinking probably just the Kokiri theme. And they just boost the performance of units around them, kind of in a general sense. They'll move faster, their attack rate will go up a little bit, so they kind of boost the speed of Kokiri units. So they're not nearly as valuable as Fado by himself, but you can build quite a few of these guys and spread them throughout your army and improve their performance. So his unique unit's also a support unit too. He's not really an offensive or defensive powerhouse like some of the other heroes. So the third Kokiri hero, however, though, is a definitely an offensive hero. She does a lot of damage too, and her unique unit is a pretty powerful unit too for its size. But the third Kokiri hero is Mirora, the chief of the Mudmen of Pharaon, and she originally, way back in the day, was a nameless character who didn't even have a name. She just kind of is a nameless Kokiri soldier who gets killed the instant she shows up. I never had any intent to use her or whatever. She just fought off a bunch of I think it was Stalfos at the time, and on the page she was on, and then she gets killed. But for some reason, everyone liked the character, and to this day I cannot figure out why. So I was like, all right, I'll take that design and I'll kind of make a character out of her, and that's what I kind of did. Now she's the chief of the Mudmen, so she's got the attire of the Mudmen, and she's got like the mud caked all over her skin, like like the rest of her people. And she rides on the back of the King of the Wolfos, so she is a cavalry hero. Her bonuses aren't necessarily cavalry bonuses, just she herself rides on the back of a creature, so she's considered cavalry. She's a very fast hero who does lots and lots of melee damage, kind of like her unique unit, which I'll go into detail in just a second. Even though she rides on a creature, they actually don't take any damage from anti-creature units, so that's pretty cool. But they get all the bonuses that creature units normally get, which is pretty great. So yeah, the unique unit of Mirora is the Wolfos. These creatures from Ocarina of Time, and I believe they were also in Twilight Princess. I think those are the only two games they showed up in. They are just these, they're basically werewolves. They don't turn into humans though, but their demeanor's kind of like werewolves, where they're these roughly humanoid wolf-like creatures. They're extremely aggressive. They maul people to death with their foreclaws, and they're a pretty cool unit too. They are a creature unit, and as I said with Mirora, they get all the bonuses of creature units. So like upgrades at buildings that affect creature units will affect them, but they don't have any of the weaknesses that creature units normally have. So some factions have units that are dedicated to killing creature units, like the Gorons have the God, what was his name? The Gorons have a little spearman unit that can deal bonus damage to creature units. It actually would not affect the Wolfos at all, so they are pretty handy in that regard. They're not the strongest unit in the world though. Like they're not very durable, but they're pretty fast and they deal a lot of damage, so pretty good offensive unit to add to your army. And I think that's it from Aurora. The fourth Kokiri hero, if you want to be really technical, he's actually a Hylian, at least in the canon of the actual Zelda games. But in Hyrule Conquest, he is actually the first Hylian who became a Kokiri when the Great Deku Tree found the first the Hylian children and ended up becoming the Kokiri, and that is Gully from A Link Between Worlds, the son of the blacksmith from A Link to the Past, and I guess A Link Between Worlds. I guess that makes him the oldest of the Kokiri. He's even older than Saria, even though he still looks like a little kid. And he rides on the back of a mountain deer. Specifically the variety that'll live on the mountains, which is based on the design from Breath of the Wild, the male one, so he's riding on a stag here. And he is a cavalry hero, where his abilities and his unit are related to cavalry. He also has some armor and weapon upgrades available to him because he has some training with being a blacksmith, considering his father was a blacksmith, so it's a little nod to that. He's probably my least favorite of the four Kokiri heroes, but if you like cavalry, especially like all the deer units that the Kokiri have, then you'll probably want to pick him because he directly affects the deer. And his unique unit right here is the Stag Chariot, which is a chariot pulled around by one of the Kokiri stags. And the cool feature of this unit is that you can garrison archers in it. You can garrison 2 archer units in it. So I just garrison that one in the back, and it'll boost their speed. So it's pretty cool. I personally am not really a fan of cavalry, despite the fact that cavalry is pretty much the strongest thing until gunpowder came along. But I definitely prefer things like infantry and things on the ground. But if you're a cavalry player who really likes the deer units, then this is definitely going to be a unit you want in the army. They are a melee unit, so they can engage with enemies in melee, but their actual strength lies in the fact that they can garrison archers in the back and pelt enemies from a distance, and then they can run away before the enemy really has a time to react. So that is pretty cool. The Kokiri Titan, I'll do the 2 Titans last like I did in the other videos, so I'll just go right into the Goma heroes. The Goma definitely have a pretty cool selection of heroes. Just visually looking at them, they look pretty cool. First up is Sulcaris, the Fallen Sage, who has, at this point, basically fully embraced the fact that she's just part of the Goma now. She doesn't even bother with assuming her, her humanoid form. She's just like, I'm a Goma at this point. I don't really need to present myself like this to all the other races of Hyrule anymore. So, technically she's actually every single Goma, including the Titan here, but, she likes to create a specific avatar, which she houses the medallion inside, so that the forest medallion's somewhere inside this body here, but Sulcaris, when you pick her as a hero, she, has quite a variety of abilities. She has an upgrade that allows all of the soldier larva Goma units to grow like these green crystalline structures on them, which will boost their armor and also give them kind of like if an enemy attacks them in melee, they'll take damage in return because of like all these jagged crystals that are growing out of their exoskeletons. So that's one of her upgrades that she can give to her army that none of the other heroes can, which is pretty cool. And I just love the way she moves around too. It's pretty cool. Just by herself, she's a pretty powerful hero. She's probably the most powerful one in the game right now. I think Darunia might do about as much damage as her, but other than him, she's probably like the most directly combat worthy, or trying to think of a word to describe her. She's just all around kind of the most powerful single hero unit in the game at the moment. There's gonna be several that are just as strong as her, or if not more powerful, but in this version she's the strongest. So if you like a really powerful hero unit, definitely go for her. Another one of her abilities that I think she will have when I release this version. Later on I'm gonna make it so she doesn't gain it until she levels up, but she can endlessly respawn after a set amount of time, so you don't need to spend resources to keep rebuilding her. So every time she's slain in battle, she'll just respawn because she's technically immortal, being part of the Goma. She could just constantly create new bodies. I mean, if she wanted to, she could probably create like hundreds of copies of this form if she really wanted. I mean, it wouldn't be, there wouldn't be much utility to it because this form can't really like do things like gather resources or whatever. But yeah, she basically can only temporarily die. She can't permanently die as long as she has the forest medallion. So, but her unique unit, which is right over here, is the Acid Sprayer, which was a unit in Hyrule Total War, but did not function the way I wanted it to. But now this unit can, and what this unit does is it can't directly attack enemy units. It doesn't have a ranged attack or a melee attack of any kind. These guys are basically giant kamikaze units. Their abdomen is full of like really highly corrosive acid. So whenever they die, or you just hit the delete key, they will explode and send acid flying everywhere and kill everything around them. And I'll go ahead and demonstrate that down here with this little group of Goma. No, sorry, they're not Goma, they're Gerudo. I'll just let them kill him, and then he'll explode and kill him. Like that. Just killed all of the Gerudo around it, and sent acid flying everywhere. Pretty awesome. That was completely impossible to do in Medieval 2. I really wanted kind of suicidal units that just exploded, like this unit in particular, and you couldn't do that in Medieval 2. So I'm really happy that I can finally do something like that in Zero. Sorry, blinked for a second there. Zero AD. I was gonna say Medieval 2, but yeah. So that is Sulcaris's unique unit. Pretty cool hero. Not my favorite Goma hero. I'll get to my favorite last, which is this one over here. But I think she's pretty cool. I really like her ability that turns most of her Goma units into like these crystalline monsters, which is pretty cool. And I like her unique unit being just this thing that self-destructs and kills everything around it, and then just leaves burning acid at the base of its corpse. It's pretty cool. But anyway, the second Goma hero is Agatha, who is a utility hero, and she's pretty creepy. Some people kind of always wondered why I made Agatha a Goma hero, and in canon I don't necessarily think she would work specifically for the Goma, but there's some things specifically in Twilight Princess that kind of suggest that she's a little bit unhinged. It's mostly theoretical, but I keep accidentally clicking on the Great Deku Tree for some reason. Anyway, in Twilight Princess, if you've ever played the game, Agatha kind of lives like in the basement of this kind of like dark house, and she like keeps like this giant like host of bugs in her basement, which is kind of creepy. She doesn't seem to have any parents. She kind of like seems sort of absent-minded, and she's kind of just really like weird and creepy. In the spin-off Hyrule Warriors, there's a thing in the game which says, I think it's like the deed to her house. So she basically owns this house. So here's like this little 10-year-old kid with no parents who owns a house, who is like really creepy, doesn't have any friends, and is just like collecting bugs in her basement and thinks she's like some queen of the bugs or whatever. So there's kind of this sort of implication that her parents are probably dead, and she's kind of just living off the money of her dead parents in her house, and she's probably going through arrested development of some kind, but she kind of has all the signs of it. So I figured, if somehow she became involved with the Goma, she'd probably, admire their sense of unity and their sense of like collective familialness, and she's kind of unhinged to begin with. So and she loves bugs. So I don't think it's too far of a stretch to believe that she'd kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? She'd kind of like gain an affinity for the Goma and think they were kind of like better, especially like if her parents were dead. She'd be like, the Hylians kind of suck. No one's taking care of me. My family's gone, but all these bugs, they all stick together no matter what. I think I'm going to help them out. So that's why she is part of the Goma. Her parents were killed in the Gerudo Wars. She found the injured Goma Queen and nursed it back to health, and she kind of sort of garnered this appreciation for their hive and wanted to go off and join it. It ended up being her undoing, but I thought it was a pretty cool twist on the character, because I think her canon counterpart, especially in Hyrule Warriors, like, she is so just absolutely stupid in Hyrule Warriors. I think like they made her some goddess of butterflies or something in that game. Just really off the wall, complete stupidity, and I did not want to go in that direction at all. So she is the voice of the Goma. She's the human voice for all of these crazy spider creatures whenever they need to speak with one of the other races of Hyrule, or they need to like talk to them. They'll send her in to do all the diplomacy. And kind of true to in tune with that sort of role of hers, she is actually a trader unit. So you could send her to trade between the marketplaces. So even though the Goma don't have a merchant unit at all, if you select Agatha as a hero, she could serve as kind of like this super trader unit. If you have allies, you can send her to markets to get resources from them. And since she rides on a Hive Keeper, she can also build all of the Goma buildings, and she can build them faster on her own. She's can build them twice as fast as one of their normal Hive Keepers. So unfortunately, I don't think I can build any of her buildings because oh wait, I can build this one, I think. Yeah, right there. So there she goes to build the Goma structure there. So that's pretty cool. I'll go ahead and stop building that. So yeah, she's a utility hero who she can actually engage in combat, unlike Fado, but she's not very good at fighting in combat. She's best served just being a super worker or sending her to get resources from your allies from markets. I would keep her out of combat unless an enemy comes into your base, unless you're feeling really brave, or you just hate her and want to see her die for some reason. But then if you hate her so much, you would probably choose one of the other three Goma heroes. But, yeah, that's Agatha. I actually, I don't really like the character much in canon, but I kind of like her as this Goma sort of speaker avatar, or whatever you want to call her, so I kind of like her, and I like her abilities, too. Her unique unit's pretty cool, too, which I'll go ahead and show now, which is no longer talking like a Hylian, like in the last video. Her unique unit is the Shroud Walker, which is, despite the fact that it's this giant, huge spider thing, it's actually not a combat unit, it's a support unit. And what these guys do is you can deploy them, and when you deploy them, they can't move, they just stand still, and they create the blue fog around them. This kind of worked in Medieval 2, but it works a lot better in 0 AD, but the fog will spread out, and everything within, the radius of the, Shroud Walker, like if enemies walk into the fog, their movement speed will be lowered so they don't move as fast. When stealth gets added into the engine, I'm actually under the impression that stealth is already in the engine, I just haven't figured out how to get it to work yet. But when it's properly working in the engine, any of your units that are within the aura of this creature will actually be invisible to enemies, so enemies won't be able to see your guys within the fog, so they're kind of a pretty handy support unit for concealing your forces and kind of disrupting enemy movement, especially if you like park them outside of an enemy base. And thirdly, they generate territory. So if you bring some Goma Queens along, and then you have this guy like park itself and then generate territory, you can start laying Goma eggs within the territory ring, and then start creating units outside of the enemy base. So that's pretty handy. So this is actually a really valuable support unit, even though it can't actually attack. It has basically 3 different purposes, so that's pretty awesome. One of my favorite looking Goma things, Goma creatures designs, but I think I prefer the units for the next 2 heroes. I don't really like the next Goma hero much as a character, but I do like his unique unit a lot. But the third Goma hero is Mido, who is actually a Kokiri.
Yeah.
He was the chief of the Kokiri, but he wanted to basically seize all power in the Kokiri forest. He wanted to marry Saria and make her his queen, and the Great Deku Tree is just like, nah, I'm not having any of that. So Mido did not like that, and he basically conspired with Sulcaris and the Goma to destroy the Kokiri and the Great Deku Tree, and to help get her the basically free her from captivity. So he is a filthy, dirty traitor, so I don't really like him that much for that reason. I mean, I kind of like him in sort of a villainous sense, but he's kind of a pathetic character. Even in canon, he's kind of like this sort of, he's basically like a bully in canon. He's not very interesting in the actual Zelda games. But yeah, he's not nearly as powerful as the other 3 Goma heroes, but he has a lot of really cool abilities that take advantage of like stealth. Like he can become camouflaged. His unique unit is camouflaged. One of his passive abilities makes all of the Goma larvae. It gives them like stealth or camouflage. So all the Goma larvae are invisible if you select him as the hero. So they gain a lot of stealth capacity. All the Goma turrets become. Well, they don't instantly become invisible, but you can upgrade all of his turrets to become invisible. So he's basically the Goma stealth hero.
Yeah.
Since he kind of lacks the raw power of like Sulcaris and the last Goma hero, he makes up for the fact that he has a lot of dirty, underhanded sort of potential with all of his stealth abilities. And that is definitely reflected in his unique unit. Like I said with the Shroud Walker, though, I haven't quite got stealth to work properly yet, so this unit isn't quite as powerful as it will be until stealth is in the engine properly. But his unique unit is the Trapdoor Goma, which was in Medieval 2, but didn't again it didn't quite work how I intended. It sort of worked because there actually was a sort of stealth ability in Medieval 2 where if your units stayed still they could become invisible. But his unit is the Trapdoor Goma, which is this lanky little creature that walks with a giant rock on its back. And what this guy can do is when you want him to attack, you click on his ability here and he'll burrow in the ground and basically just become this sort of unassuming rock, and he'll gain a stealth ability and enemies just can't see him. So if you have like a line of these guys like in a choke point or something and an enemy army is walking over them, they'll just pop out of their little holes and attack them. I'll go ahead and kind of demonstrate that over here on these poor Gerudo. So they're kind of like a stealth ambush kind of unit. Until stealth is properly added, they're basically like little mobile turrets. But anyway, put him in the ground, and he just pops out of the ground there and keeps attacking them, which I think is pretty cool. Oh, looks like this guy's coming to help him. Armagoma saves the day. Oh, they killed the poor guy. The Armagoma avenged him. So yeah, that was Goma's unique unit. I guess that wasn't a very impressive display, but this guy definitely made up for it, and we'll get to this unit in just a moment. So the fourth Goma hero, which is probably my favorite Goma hero, is the Matriarch. Not the first Goma, but the first Goma in their, I guess you could say, their current form. Basically the first female reproductive Goma that started to spawn all of the larvae that eventually came to encompass their entire swarm. She was one of the eyes of their creator that was when their creator was destroyed by the First Sages. I think I told the story in the last video. Basically, all of his parts were kind of like blown across the landscape, including his eyes, and each of his eyes sort of kind of transformed into a bunch of different creatures. One of them was the Matriarch here. You can see the eye on the back of her abdomen there. All the eyes became different creatures. One became her, another became Vitreous, which is their wonder building. Another one became Argus. Another one became the Magtail Queen, and what's the other one? There's one more. The Tektites. Oh yeah, and then another one became the Aruridas, which are the scorpion creatures in Lanier province. You can kind of find them in the deserts. So their creator, which is kind of the Titan here, all of his eyes kind of became the various different one-eyed spider-like creatures found throughout the Zelda series. But one of them became her, so she's incredibly ancient. She's basically just been laying eggs kind of non-stop. And she is pretty darn awesome. And if it wasn't obvious, all the little... she's followed by a huge swarm of mites and royal larvae that constantly circle around her and guard her. She can't directly attack enemies, kind of like a similar unit that the Goma have, but any enemy that comes adjacent to her just gets attacked by all the mites and the little what are they called? The larvae that are circling around her. So she can still deal damage to enemies, she just can't directly attack herself. She's kind of like a Goma Queen in that she can lay a bunch of eggs. So, yeah, like the Goma Queen, she can produce new units, which is pretty handy. There's that eye on her abdomen's pretty creepy. I love her. She's based on sorry, I'm blanking for a second. Her design's based on the Armagoma from Twilight Princess after the armor like breaks off. And then there's just the little eye, and then the spider attached to the eye, and then the huge swarm of larvae that are around her. She's based on that. And in regards to that, I don't think this is going to be in the next release, since active hero abilities aren't added in. But when she gains levels, when she gets to like level 5 or level 10, I haven't decided yet, she automatically transforms into the Armagoma, which I'll go ahead and do right now. She transforms into the giant Armagoma boss creature from Twilight Princess, which is pretty freaking awesome. So she becomes a giant siege ranged hero unit that can deal quite a bit of damage. And she can still lay eggs too, like a queen, so if it wasn't obvious, I think she's probably my favorite of the four Goma heroes. Just aesthetically, she looks awesome in both of her forms, and just her abilities are pretty cool too. Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to get a good look at that creature. It's just such a cool design. I really like the aesthetic of Twilight Princess. It had a lot of really cool designs for enemies. Definitely, probably my favorite game in terms of like aesthetic designs for not only the enemies in that game, but all the characters too. I really like the art style of Twilight Princess. It's a really big shame they haven't done something similar to that since then. But anyway, her unique unit is the Praetorian from Hyrule Warriors. This guy here, which actually kind of like the design of the creature. It was one of the even though I don't really like the game of Hyrule Warriors, one thing I do like about Hyrule Warriors, I was just kind of saying how sad I was that the art style of Twilight Princess hasn't been used since then, but Hyrule Warriors probably came the closest to emulating the way Twilight Princess looks. So I kind of like the way Hyrule Warrior looks, despite the fact that the game is absolutely, completely insane and stupid. But I like a lot of the designs for the creatures in Hyrule Warriors, especially their version of the Goma, which is the unique unit for the Matriarch. The Praetorian, which are her personal bodyguards. Kind of like in Hyrule Warriors, it's got this giant shield thing in the front, which it uses to protect itself. So this is a really durable unit. And it's got two giant claws, which it can use to climb any sort of incline, which I'll go ahead and demonstrate now. This unit can basically walk over mountains without... Oh, well, they don't have eyelashes. I was going to say without batting an eye, but they don't have any, so not that funny. But these guys can climb up cliffs and get over impassable barriers and ambush an enemy base. Now, unfortunately, like I said earlier, the active hero abilities are not in the engine yet. One of the abilities I really want this unit to have is it'll have a thing you click on that allows it to leap over obstacles. So this guy can basically jump over like rivers or rocks or whatever. Or in this case, there's an enemy base down here. You could have it jump off the mountain into the enemy base and start attacking it from the inside. So that'll be pretty awesome. Because in Hyrule Warriors, these guys could like leap across pretty big distances. So they're kind of like jumping spiders in that regard. So hopefully down the road, these guys will be able to leap. And that'll make them a pretty terrifying unit, actually. Pretty good ambush unit. In a way, even though they're kind of sort of intended to be like a defensive sort of unit because of their shield. Now, this second unit here technically is not a unique unit for the Matriarch. This is actually the normal Armagoma that all of the Goma heroes like have. Their sort of ranged siege unit. But one of the Matriarch's abilities, technically not an ability, one of her upgrades that she gives the Goma is the ability to give their large units armor plating like her. So when you research her unique tech, her Armagomas and Taint Gomas will get the armor plating from Twilight Princess. Kind of like you see here, it's got the little metallic armor over it, which is pretty cool. So it makes them pretty durable. That's another reason why I like this hero a lot, just because she can upgrade all of her siege units, which I think is pretty awesome. I just think aesthetically the armor from Twilight Princess looks pretty cool too, with all the little like the little, not really swirly designs, the little sort of Mesoamerican looking patterns on the armor. I think is pretty awesome. So yeah, those are the 4 heroes for the Kokiri and the Goma. I'm trying to make sure I didn't forget anything before I talk about the 2 Titans. I think I covered everything of theirs. I did all their units. Yeah, the acid guy exploded. The Trapdoor Goma kind of died in an embarrassing display in true Mido fashion. I guess I will talk about the 2 Titans. Anyone who's played Ocarina of Time probably knows instantly who the Kokiri Titan is, the Great Deku Tree, who is a very awesome and impressive Titan as far as like his power and abilities, and visually think he's awesome. You can see like the little leaves falling out of his canopy, and I think he just looks really cool. He was in the Total War version of the game, but because I was limited to using elephant skeletons, his animations were all kind of wonky, but now he's got his own, custom animation set, which I think is just awesome. I also really love the sound effects he makes when he walks around. So that's pretty cool. Anyway, he is... I don't want to say he's a siege titan. He can do quite a bit of damage to buildings, but he's more of like a crowd control titan. He's really good at attacking a bunch of smaller units around him. He's kind of like Fee for the Hylians, where he's good at attacking a bunch of smaller units, but he's actually more vulnerable to like really large units, and he's really, really vulnerable to fire. So, like the Armagomas, they shoot out fire beams. A pair of them would probably be able to take him out relatively quickly. So you want to keep him away from like siege weapons and especially like fire. So a bunch of archers with like fire arrows could take him down really fast, which makes sense. He's basically a giant tree, so fire would naturally burn him down pretty quickly. So you want to use him for kind of like crowd control. Since the active hero abilities aren't in, although you could probably do it even without them, but one of his abilities I want is he's able to root into the ground, and when he's rooted into the ground, he actually starts regenerating health really rapidly, and he kind of like becomes a giant turret that you can garrison Kokiri units into the canopy to shoot out of. That might actually be in the next version, since it would only need to use the same thing that like Fado uses to change between the different songs that he plays. It doesn't. The ability to turn into a turret actually doesn't need the active ability thing in the engine. It only needs the upgrade thing. So that might be in the next version of the game, where he roots himself into the ground and becomes a giant turret that can rapidly regenerate. So if he's in a battle and he's taking a lot of damage, and you can get him out of the fight in time before he dies, you can just root him into the ground and he'll start regenerating health pretty rapidly, and you can save him and save yourself a bunch of resources rebuilding him if he dies. So that was pretty cool. One of my favorite titans. I really like this guy. Just visually, I just think he looks really awesome. Just the idea of a giant like walking spider tree, I always thought that was really cool. So I like his mustache and beard made out of leaves. So yeah, that is the Kokiri Titan. One of the larger ones, although I think as far as size goes, the Goma Titan kind of has him beaten. Although technically, as far as the body mass goes, this Titan is a little bit smaller than the Great Deku Tree. It's just got really, really long legs. Although, in reality, this thing is probably about twice as large as it's represented here, but because I don't want it to be too hard for the player to control, like this giant thing the size of the screen, he's kind of scaled down a little bit. But in reality, it's about 3 times larger than this. But this is the Goma Titan, the resurrected form of their creator, Iomonnis. And it's fused with just a ton of different bodies of fallen Goma. Sulcaris is fused with it. The eyes of Vitreous are in its body. You can see them like all twitching around up there. This is the creator of the Goma that was slain, back in the Primordial Age, and it's been sort of resurrected through Sulcaris' will to destroy all of Hyrule. And maybe I'm just biased, but this thing is kind of awesome. I love the size of this thing. I love just how menacing it is. I love the sound effects it makes, and I just like the fact that it can walk over trees, and it's just really powerful, and it's just this really awesome creature. And yeah, I love the sound effects. I think this thing is just really cool. Anyway, yeah, I mentioned that the active hero abilities aren't in, so the abilities I want to give him probably won't be in the next version. I showed one of them in the last video, but I've taken it out because I'm not sure how I really want it to work yet. But one of his abilities is all of the Eyes of Vitreous, like charge him up with electricity and shoot out electric bolts all around him. So when he activates that ability, he'll have this like aura ring around him that just fills up with electric bolts and damages everything around him for, I don't know, maybe 30 seconds. But the active abilities aren't working. So when you turn that on, it can't stop itself unless you manually turn it off. And that's kind of overpowered, I think. So I think it's probably gonna be disabled until they add the active abilities into the engine. Same thing with the other ability I want to give it, which is its eye here. The main eye charges up a really, really giant beam of fire that just kind of shoots out and incinerates everything in front of it. So this thing's kind of like a siege titan in a way, kind of like Bigoron. It's actually not really good at crowd control, even though it's like this really giant creature because of how lanky it is. If a bunch of really, really small units gang up on it, they can kind of hack it down bit by bit. So unlike the Great Deku Tree, where you kind of want to keep swarms of your smaller units away, this guy you actually kind of want to swarm with your smaller armies, because you'll have a lot more trouble taking them out in one go, like the Great Deku Tree. Although, like the Great Deku Tree, this guy is also vulnerable to fire. So if you have trebuchets, or you're fighting another Goma player with Armagomas, you'll want to burn this thing to the ground as quickly as you can. It's really, really vulnerable to fire. And also magic damage, too. If you have mages, this thing will take quite a bit of damage from mages. This thing's more good against other larger units, so it's pretty good against other hero units. It's good against cavalry. It's good against infantry if it doesn't get swarmed by like 300 of them. Yeah, it's good against attacking buildings. What else is it good at doing? It can walk over pretty much any building or tree or obstacle without being slowed down, so it can get around pretty quickly too. So it's very despite the fact it's big and not very maneuverable, it's actually it can go in pretty much any location on the map, and it can cross bodies of water that are as deep as its eye. So it can get around despite the fact that it's slow and clumsy moving. So that's pretty handy. The Deku Tree can't really climb over cliffs and stuff like this guy can. So if there's a way back behind an enemy base over a mountain range, this thing can just walk over the mountain range and start destroying the base from behind. So yeah, this guy's kind of a siege titan, sort of. An anti-large unit titan. You just want to keep it away from swarms of little units and enemy siege weapons, and this thing will be pretty good. If you want to see this thing in action, I have 2 other videos with it. I'm not really going to waste time showing it slaughter hundreds of units again. So if you want to check it out, take a look at the last 2 videos I posted. I show it doing quite a few cool things in those videos. So anyway, this thing's just so cool. I love the sound effects too. I can't wait for the ambient sound effects to be added in too, because I kind of wanted to give it this really spooky sounding like breathing effect when it's just standing around. I think that'll be pretty cool. Anyway, is there anything else I have forgotten to show? I think that's it. I think I've shown all the heroes, I've talked about all their unique units, and I showed the 2 titans. So yeah, I think I'll wrap this video up. So yeah, the Kokiri and Goma are done, which means the next version of the game is sometime around the corner. I hesitate to give an exact day. It's probably going to be sometime late in June. It might be earlier in June. I'm not sure. The next 2 weeks I picked up quite a few shifts, and the guy that's doing all the AI for the game is going to be gone for the next 2 weeks, and I really want to wait for him to get back and finish up the AI for the Kokiri and the Goma, so that players can go against them in like a skirmish mode and they don't have to play multiplayer. I kind of want this to be as polished of a release as possible, especially with like in regards to like the AI. I want to do a balanced pass on most of the units. He's also added in different damage types like magic, and I need to make sure all of that's working fine. So the next version of the game probably won't be ready for like a month and a half. If you're a patron, I might release a kind of rough around the edges version of this for you guys in like a week or so. I just want to go through and make sure the Goma and the Kokiri are relatively stable for like a player to play as. So sometime in the next week, if you're a patron, I might have a release for you guys where you can try out the Kokiri and the Goma to see how they play. It just might be a little rough around the edges, just a heads up. So yeah, I'll probably do that for the patrons. While I'm waiting for Exodarian to get back to do the AI and stuff, I might add in another NPC faction. I'm thinking of adding in the Zuna and the Huskus. I think they'd. I have all the models for them done. I just need to rig them and get them into the engine. I need to do some of their animations, which shouldn't take me too long since they don't have all the buildings that a full faction has. Each of them only have 2 buildings, and they only have I think it's 6 units. Is it 5 or 6 units? I think it's 6 units. So they'll only take like a week or 2 to get both of those in. I also kind of want to add more wildlife. Obviously, I'm going to add the Kokiri deers to the Kokiri forest maps. I'll add wild wolfos. I want to add like things like tektites and some Goma creatures in the wild, so that they're one unit that can convert tektites can actually use that on certain maps. So I'll probably add more wildlife over the next few weeks, and I might. No promises, but I might add in all the mercenary units in the next few weeks if time permits. So yeah, sometime probably in late June, the Kokiri and the Goma will be out. I'm not sure exactly when. That's just kind of an estimate. But yeah, hopefully the Kokiri heroes and the units that the heroes get are looking cool. If you guys don't like these guys or these 2 factions, hopefully you like one of the other 4 or one of the upcoming factions. After this version's out, I think I said in my last video, I'll do another cinematic since I've almost wrapped up that whole arc of the storyline, and then I will start on Ordana and Lanayru province, the 2 provinces. I'll go into more details on them when I'm actually I got something to show for them. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you like the work I'm doing, you want to help me work on this faster, I have a link to my Patreon in the video description. Feel free to chip in a buck or 2. Every little bit helps, and hopefully one day I'll be able to work on this full time. But in the meantime, stay tuned for more videos, and hopefully you guys have a good one.